money for me is like horse shit. I said, what do you mean? I said, well, spread it round. It acts like fertilizer and things grow. Hoard it and it starts to smell. Okay? I have no intention of being the richest guy in the cemetery or the best looking guy in the cemetery. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
And so for me, it's how you earn your money is really important, ethically and honestly, and then what you do with it. That's the most important thing. And for me, it's really important that you do make money. You know that's a thing I think a lot of people don't understand when they slag off at a lot of people. True, there are some rich arseholes, but here's the truth. If you're rich and you're an arsehole, you're a effing arsehole because you've got no reason to be one.
Yes.
So,
absolutely.
It's about knowing that stuff.
And I believe we're recording because Guy would tell me
okay.
otherwise.
Yeah.
Just on that thread of money, who taught you that? Who taught you those principles?
That's an interesting question, and I've thought about it often. And I'll go back to my mother, who is, and will always be my hero. And I can remember her when I was about 5 or 6 years old. There was a thing back in those days called the family benefit, and that was money that basically families got for children. And my mother said to me, that family benefit, it's not her money, it's not my money, her money, it's my money. So she got me a post office bank savings account, which most people won't know about these days. And it basically was a little handbook. And I'd go to the post office. She took me to the post office with that money, and we'd deposit it. And you see the money get deposited, and there'd be a hand notation in the handbook from the teller that the money had been deposited. And so I can't remember how much it was. It was what I thought was a ridiculous amount of money, like about $6 a week. It was huge. And so that grew. And then I had a good old piggy bank, which was a pig, right, with a hole in it. And my mum used to give me, and I can't remember when it was, I think about between 66 or 67, the council's administration building, which is 18 stories high behind the town hall, and it's now been converted to apartments. When that building was built, my mum got a job cleaning the 11th floor, and she took me at night to help her, and she gave me $1 a week for emptying the rubbish bins. And of course I saved that money. And then when I went to Ponsonby Primary School, because we grew up in Franklin Road in Freeman's Bay when it was regarded as a slum. I mean, look at that area now. And 1 bedroom of a boarding house, my mother, my father, my younger sister and I. And she gave me that $1 a week for the cleaning, and then she gave me 25 cents a week to catch the bus. I went to Ponsonby Primary School, so I had to catch the bus up College Hill, get off at Curran Street and walk down. So that was for a 10-ride concession ticket. And what I would do is because College Hill meant going uphill, I'd catch the bus to school and I'd walk home. So every second week I had another 25 cents. Okay? And so these are lessons that I learned young. And so one of the things that I'd love to see taught in school, people talk about financial literacy. I mean, what jargon is that? I mean, just teach children how to save and the value of money and the value of work. See what my mum was doing? You work, you get rewarded. She knew that I was going to walk home one way, but she still gave me the 25 cents, right? And at the top of Curran Street, there was a dairy. So what did I do with that 25 cents I had every second week? And by the way, see, I wasn't spending any of the dollar or the family benefit, and that money was just growing and growing. And you get a thing called interest. And I learned the power of a thing called compounding interest. Okay, the money, the sooner you put the money in, and then interest starts taking care of itself for you, and it compounds year on year. And so I would buy myself a thing called a Jolly Lolly, which cost 4 cents. Right, so it must have been in 67, I think, when decimal currency happened. And so that was 4 cents of the 25. And then a milkshake cost the astronomical amount of 15 cents. So what I would do was buy a pint of milk, which cost 4 cents. And they used to have milkshake sachets, which cost 2 cents. I'd shake the milk bottle, drink the top off it, put the milkshake sachet in it, shake it up, and look at that, I got a milkshake for 6 cents. So I learnt the value of money early on. Long-winded way of answering your question.
And I guess maybe people, and, I won't discount myself from this, feel the pressure. I want that milkshake like the other kid.
That's right.
You didn't have that feeling of...
No.
You didn't feel like you were FOMO, missing out?
No. I loved it. As far as I still had a milkshake. And I had more milkshake because I had a pint of milkshake. You know what I mean? And mine was in a bottle. Theirs was in a blooming one of those, paper containers. So I was a winner. So it's really important, the words that we use in the internal dialogue when we talk to ourselves. I also know what it's like to feel whakamā, or embarrassed to be Māori growing up. Okay? And all my life, I had to put up with people saying to me, or all around me, saying things about, dirty Māori or useless Māori and all of those things. So, and in my work career and things like that. And when I'd say to people, you do know that I'm Māori, don't you? And they go, oh, not you. What do you mean, not me? Well, look at all the things that you've done. Look at all the things that you've achieved. Because you see, the societal standard image of us is as the defendant, right? As welfare social welfare beneficiaries and defendants. We're so much more than that. There are more people of Māori descent, like me, out there than people know about. The thing is, there aren't enough of us who have been willing to share these stories, okay? And the more we share this story, our story, the more we give hope to others that you can do it. I came from a slum, what society called a slum. And then my mother said to me, if you have good manners, you'll be welcome in anybody's house in the world. My mother was fanatical about manners.
Yes.
She was fanatical about personal hygiene. She was fanatical about us having good handwriting, about us being able to have good command of language. My mum's first language was Māori. My dad's first language was Bulgarian. Okay, that's why I'm a Bulgarian Māori. And I'm equally proud of both sides of my heritage.
Yes.
That's an important thing. And my mum, okay, her education ended at Standard 4. My mum was a solo teenage mum.
Wow.
I didn't know I had a brother until I was, I think, about 34, 35 years old. My dad knew. My mum had a child before they got together, and that was in Kaitaia. However, that was at a time when being a single, you imagine that, a single Māori teenage mum probably couldn't have been a bigger crime. And so he was taken away from her, And my uncles, who were older than my mum, were coming from Auckland. We are from the north, to get him, but they got there too late. And so, this woman who came from that background, my grandparents both died when my mum was young. My grandfather brought my mother up. My grandfather was a bushman. Okay, so my mum grew up in a mud floor nekau palm hut in a place called Whangapai. And to get to Whangapai, you've got to, which is, about 15, 20 k's southwest of Kaitaia. It's serious nowheresville there, but to get to where we're from, you have to go to the Whangapai harbour and then go up the Awaroa River. So it's serious dueling banjos country. There is still no coverage there, And so my mum came from that. This is what I can tell you about her. Her handwriting was immaculate. Her command of Māori and English second to none. If you came from another country, she learnt some words in your language so she could talk to you. In Franklin Road, where we were growing up, in fact, somebody sent me a school photo of my primary school class. Two of them at the Napier Street Primary, which is now called Freeman's Bay Primary, and then at Ponsonby Primary, and the caption was "Can you spot the white person?" Right? Because there wasn't any at Freeman's Bay Primary as it is now, Napier Street. But when I went to Ponsonby, there was a couple. And so what little we had, which was food, and my mum was an outstanding cook, we shared with everybody. At Christmas time, my mum would put a hangi down in the backyard of our place, 72 Franklin Road in Freeman's Bay. If you go past that place, I laugh because it's a two-story square-fronted villa, which has got a historic places trust covenant on it.
Yep.
And I laugh my head off it because I've been inside that place. There is nothing in it of historical significance. It's been tampered with so much.
Yeah.
The only thing that is the same are basically the weatherboards on the exterior. Everything is different. And I've been out into the backyard, and that backyard is tiny. And my mum used to put a hangi down in that, and everybody in the neighbourhood. So we'd have Chinese people, we'd have Indian people, we would have Rarotonga and Niue, and they would bring something from there, from that they cooked. So we'd have some Chinese food, we'd have some that good old Cook Island potato salad.
Yes.
We'd have raw fish, all of these sorts of things. And my mum was way ahead of her time because my dad was Bulgarian. So my mum would make things like eggplant dips and hummus. And we were eating things like feta cheese and olives. And no kid wanted to trade my lunch at school. You know what I mean?
Yeah, too.
So my mum was forward thinking. I represented New Zealand at sport. My mum was cooking me salads and steaks and all sorts of food, healthy food. You go, how did she know about all of that stuff? Okay, before it all became Gucci. So
absolutely. Sorry to interrupt, but there's the idea that nutrition is probably one of the biggest parts of mental health. You 100%. Were getting fed amazing cuisine.
100%. And I'll tell you another story. So we went from Freeman's Bay because our doctor wrote a letter to the State Advances Corporation, which said, fortunately, I say that I had rheumatic fever. Okay, so that enabled us, and he was probably the first Chinese doctor in New Zealand, Dr. Liang. And I was speaking with somebody, in fact, only a couple of days ago, a Samoan guy, and I was recounting this to them, and he said, Dr. Liang. And I went, yes, that was him. And so he had the same doctor. And so Dr. Liang wrote this letter that I had rheumatic fever that enabled my mother to go to the state advances. And we were then given a state house in Glendowie, one of those triplexes, straight opposite Glendowie College and Crossfield Road, just around the corner from Madeline Ave, which was shortened to Mad Ave, supposedly the worst street in New Zealand. And out of Mad Ave and Crossfield Road, 3 Māori boys, myself and 2 others, Stephen Heller and Michael Britton, all 3 of us have gone on to achieve amazing things. All right? Because we all believed the same thing. It's not what happened to us that mattered. It's what we did about it that counts. Yeah. Okay? One of them, Steve, went off to join the SAS, was in the New Zealand SAS, the Australian SAS, served overseas, then ended up getting himself a business degree. Secondary school wasn't his thing. Michael, secondary school wasn't his thing as well. Michael ended up starting with his wife an outbound tourism company, taking New Zealanders on motorbike tours around South America through Peru, Bolivia, Chile, Mongolia, Southeast Asia, Thailand, Greece. And then, I was like them and other Māori boys. I went to school to eat my lunch. However, I did it for a different reason, because conventional academic education was really easy for me. I left school in 1977 with a thing called an A bursary, and I hardly went to class. I came within an ant's whisker of being expelled because I was involved in a number of extracurricular activities, but I always had money. I was a prefect in the 6th form, which meant that, I automatically probably supposed to be a candidate to become the head boy in the 7th form. I also got given a job at school emptying the rubbish bins. I was paid, I think, $15 a week to do that, and that job was supposed to take 2 hours a day after school. Well, I used to run and do it in half an hour. I still got paid for 2. You see what I'm doing here? And then on top of that, because I'm emptying the bins, and my job was to burn all the rubbish at the incinerator, because schools had incinerators in those days. And then all the bins were all the empty soft drink bottles. And in soft drink bottles, you got 2 cents back on. So I would collect all those bottles and take them to the tuck shop. And I'd get 2 cents back on those. So you can see all along, all my life, I had a lot of money. Yes. And I wasn't spending it.
Yeah, saving it.
I was saving it. Okay? And then I got an A bursary. I went to everybody was trying to make me a lawyer or an accountant. Those things didn't spin my wheels. And then the other thing that was emerging at that time was a thing called computer programming. Now, computer programming in those days was basically COBOL and punching cardboard cards. All right? It was not spinning my wheels either. So I did guidance counselling like, every other kid, and the guidance counsellor was running out of things, and they said to me, well, there's only one last thing here. I said, what's that? And they said, advertising and marketing. And I went, what's that? Now, to their credit, they said, we don't know. So I said, don't worry, because you see, the other thing that I always did, I've always been a prolific reader of books. So all of those years I was growing up, I read books and books and books. I still do. And I said, don't worry, I'll go down to the St. Heliers Bay Library and get a book out. And the only book they had in the library, on advertising was called Confessions of an Ad Man by a guy called David Ogilvy, who started a company called Ogilvy and Mather, which then was the biggest ad agency in the world. Mm. And in it, he said 3 things that resonated with me. The first one was that he'd started life as a chef. Chef, owner of the biggest ad agency in the world. I like that. Second thing he said was, it didn't matter what academic qualifications you had. If you were any good, you could make a lot of money. Now, to a kid without a lot of money, that sounds pretty good, doesn't it? And then the third thing he said, which I've since found out to not be so true, was it didn't matter who you knew. If you were any good, you could make a lot of money. I've since found out that's not quite the same. And fortunately, I've built a lot of relationships with a lot of people based on mutual trust and respect. And it gives me access to a lot of things. I only have 2 skills. I remember names and I link dots and I put people together. So coming back to that, I then went, this thing called advertising and marketing, how do I find out about that? Now, it wasn't taught in the universities then because it wasn't Gucci, okay? But it was taught at ATI, Auckland Technical Institute. And it was the second year of the course. So I made an application to go and do that course. Now, kids with A bursaries aren't supposed to go to technical institutes, are they? So I turned up, and this is a very important thing for people to learn, right? A smart ass thinks they know all the answers. What you have to learn is how to ask questions and not be afraid to ask questions. And you need to know how to frame a question up. And as a kid, because I was always naturally curious, and that used to annoy some teachers, but to others, it was like, wow, we've got a kid who wants to know. So we're going to feed that mind, all right? And so I learned this. I use these guys as I call them my horsemen. Who, how, what, why, where, and when. All right? So those are the questions you need to ask somebody when you don't know something. So I turned up at the interview because then the tutor interviewed everybody who wanted to do the course. And I was in a tiny room, probably half the size of this, with the tutor who was a dapper Englishman, and he smoked a pipe. And in this room was just pipe smoke everywhere. I don't smoke, right? So you can imagine what that did to me. And effectively, I interviewed him. It was only the second year of the course. And I asked him, had he worked in advertising? Where had he worked? What had he done? And how do I get a job? And he told me that he'd worked for the largest advertising agency in New Zealand, which was called Charles Haynes then. It's now called FCB, for Conan Belding. Calenza was a breakaway from Charles Haynes. That he'd been a director of the company, that he'd run the television department, and that if I wanted a job, I should write to every advertising agency in New Zealand and tell them that I was doing this course and ask for one. All right, so I didn't wait for a job to be advertised. I didn't do it through a headhunter, or as I call them, slave traders. Okay? All I did, because if you're any good, you should know who's good in your sector. You don't need some flipping slave trader to charge you a big fee to find that person for you. I got armed with that information. I ran, and I mean ran. I literally ran from the campus in Wellesley Street all the way down to Britomart and jumped on the bus. The bus went to Madeline Ave, to Mad Ave, got off it, ran back to our house in Crossfield Road, looked up the yellow pages, and A for advertising. And I think there were 30 advertising agencies in Auckland. I hand wrote a letter. Remember, I'm just 16, turning 17. I hand wrote a letter to every one of them, which meant I ended up writing about 50 or 60, because every time I made a spelling mistake, I had to do it again. And then I ran to the letterbox every day for the next 3 weeks. 30 letters that I sent, I got 29 standard rejection letters, but I got one that said, come in and have a chat. And it was from Charles Haynes. Okay? And to this day, I still believe that, I never got the chance to ask him, Brian, that he phoned them and said, if this kid does touch base, have a chat. And I went in, and that was my first lesson in rejection, right? And that what you need to understand about rejection is this: every rejection, every no gets you one step closer to a yes, all right? So get knocked down 2,000 times, get up 2,001 times. And it's fear of failure, fear of rejection, and fear of not being loved that prevents people from becoming the best they possibly can and living the best life they possibly can. So I go in and I have an interview with Mr. Henshaw, because that's what you called everybody in those days. And Charles Haynes was in the flashiest building in Auckland. They just moved into it. It was on the corner of Grays Ave and Merrill Drive. Still looks pretty good, that building. It was in the United Building Society building. They were on the 4th floor, and they had the United Building Society accounts. And Mr. Henshaw said to me, after chatting to me, he said, what are you doing in, as he called them, the May school holidays, or as they're now called, semester one, after semester one break? And I said, nothing. He said, come in and work for us for a week. What he really meant was, we need a slave to do every shit job around here that nobody else had done. So I went in there and they gave me a desk in a corridor. And by the way, Charles Haynes had every big account in New Zealand, and they'd had some accounts for 50, 80 years, right? So they'd built relationships based on mutual trust and respect over years. What's happened these days, everything's seen as a transaction, all right? Relationships are more important than transactions. That's something that people need to understand, and they don't. I'm segueing away, but I'll come back because this is important. When people say to me, can you send this to all your networks? And they talk about networks, I go, they don't understand. They don't understand relationships. Relationships are something you have with people. And you know how you build relationships with people? Like this. You talk to them.
Yep.
You don't email them, all right? You don't bloody send a post out on blah, blah, blah. You phone people up and you talk to them. I have access to a lot of people, all right? And I'm not saying that to sound like I'm a big fat tosser shoving something up my own backside. I have them because they've been built on mutual trust and respect over a lot of years. Yeah. I get a lot of people coming to me and saying they've got a good idea. And I go, great, what's the idea? And they tell me. And I go, cool. So if I give you $20,000 right now for that idea, are you happy? And they go, yeah. And I go, cool. So if I then make a phone call tomorrow and I sell that idea for $1 million, are you still happy? Shit, no. What's changed? You were happy yesterday, but you're not happy today. And they go, but you just made one phone call. Now here's the thing. They've discounted the 40, 50 years it's taken me to be able to make that phone call. Yeah. So to all of those people, I say this, thank you very much. Go off and do it yourself. Yeah. And then they'll go away, and often they'll send me this vitriolic email that's about 10 pages long, and then nothing happens because they don't know what to do with it. And here's the thing. Nothing ever happens until somebody takes an action. It's very important, all right? But it's fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of not being loved. And now, and we're seeing a lot of this right now, there's a fourth fear. You don't, however, develop it until you get a little bit older, you get married, you have kids, you get a mortgage, and it's called fear of losing your job. Once you develop that fear, you stop contributing and you start conforming. all right? And you no longer are living the best possible life you can, all right? Because all of those fears have got you, and you're stuck. You're now like that possum in the dark with the headlights on, and you don't contribute anymore. You just conform, and you say yes, and you don't question. So it's fear. Yeah. So you got to learn how to overcome your fears. Now I segued away, and I can't remember what I segued away from because that's my chemo brain kicking in.
And it's beautiful that we segue, and that's what I love about podcasting. I think if we loop back, it's you're doing the school holidays work.
Yes. That's right. You got it. And you've hit the nail squarely on the blunt head, as one of my old bosses used to say. And so come the Friday, I was absolutely positive that Mr. Henshaw was going to offer me a job. So I thought, I'm just going to sit here by my desk in the corridor, and he's going to come out of his office, and he's going to walk down here, and he's going to give me a job. So 5:15, everybody's walking off to the lift. Mr. Henshaw hasn't come. 5:30, there's not so many people left around. Mr. Henshaw still hasn't come. 5:45, there's basically nobody left. So I'm thinking, oh, well, maybe it's not going to happen. 6:01, I'm slinking off to the lift. I'm just about to press the button. Mr. Henshaw comes out of his office, comes up to me and said, "How did you enjoy working here?" I went, "I absolutely loved it." Now, I can tell you, I did not absolutely love it, all right? And so he said to me, "When do you finish?" And this is the stuff that those old guys used to keep in their heads. I said, November the 28th. Now, I always remember that because the last day when you're doing something that you don't really want to do is the day you want to come around real fast. And he said to me, "That's a Friday." I went, "Oh, yeah." He said, "Come in here on the Monday and you've got a job working for us." Wow. Now, I was the only kid who had a job by the end of term 1, confirmed, and by there was probably only 1 or 2 others who had jobs by the end of the year in the whole class. See, because I didn't wait, you see? And people say, "How do you know how to do these things?" I don't know how I know how to do these things. What I do know is that I learned from my mother the best time to do anything is now, all right? Now. And it's why I laugh with people, and you know how long it's taken for us to do this, right? And you know how quickly I respond to you.
Yes.
I do that with everyone.
Yes.
If somebody reaches out to me now, I respond. Doesn't mean it's going to amount to anything, but I've learned that courtesy from my mother.
Yeah.
The least you can do is say please and thank you, and if somebody talks to you, talk back. All right? And so many people won't do that anymore. And when you talk to people, this is another good yarn. I don't know if you remember, there used to be a radio broadcaster who was also an MP, and she was on television as well. Her name was Pam Corkery, right? Now, Pam was known pretty much because she had a potty mouth, okay? Now, Pam knows how I feel about good manners. And she was writing an article for Next magazine because she had been present in a gas station in South Auckland, and she'd seen all of these young kids come up and they were rude to the person behind the counter and everything. So she phoned me and asked me about the importance of good manners. And I, quick as a light, went, "Oh, Pam, I can do better than that. I'll talk to an expert and then I'll call you back." And she went, "Would you?" And I said, yeah. I looked at the time and I said, "Well, it's coming up 2:45. My son will be home from school shortly." And you could hear the pause, right? It was like, oh my God. Anyway, so I hung up, and son came home from school. He was 7 or 8 years old. In fact, no, he might have even been younger. And I explained to him that I've got this friend and she's doing this story for a magazine on good manners. And I did to him what I did with all of my nieces and nephews. And I said, the question she asked me is, are manners important? And I said to him, so, are good manners important? And he said, absolutely, while he was chewing on his snack. And I said, give me 3 reasons why. That's the important thing that I do with all of my nieces and nephews as well. And this is what he said, straight out of his mouth, verbatim. If you're polite to people, they'll be polite back. I went, oh, that's pretty good. No adult would have come up with that. If you're rude to people, they'll be rude back. I went, wow, look at the wisdom coming out of here. And then the third thing he said was, if you're polite to people, it helps you make friends. When you've got lots of friends, they help you solve problems. And I went, holy hell, where did he get that from? And I thought, he's mirroring me, right? And the people around him, his mother, and we're fortunate. We had a full-time nanny, all right, from the age of 3 months. How's that? Until he was, I think, about 10 years old. Now, we didn't need that full-time nanny, but we had her. Why? Because I didn't have grandparents. On my mother's side, I think I told you, they died. On my dad's side, in Bulgaria, they'd also died. And on my wife's side, her mother didn't live in New Zealand, and her father was a typical Latino man. I won't explain what that means. And so we had Joan, who was basically an elderly English woman, okay? And I said to our wife, we break the relationship between those two at our own peril, okay? So from 3 months until she decided that she was going to go and live in Christchurch to be closer to her grandchildren, she worked for us 40 hours a week, all right? Most people only give nannies or whatever a couple of hours a day. I go, how can they live? You're only thinking about it from your own personal self-interest. And this is a lesson for people as well. Back in the day, the way you did this was you wrote an ad in the local newspaper, right? In our case, it was the Central Leader, because we lived in Mount Eden. And I asked my wife to we'll write a brief on it. We wrote a brief, and here's what we wrote in that brief. I said, well, go for the doctor, the kitchen sink. And this is what she wrote down. We wanted somebody who could speak Spanish, somebody who was willing to cook, somebody who was willing to clean, somebody who could drive, somebody who was willing, because I work from home and my wife is a doctor, okay, who, if I had to go to a meeting and I was running late, could stay, all right? And so we weren't feeling pressured or under any stress. And I asked people to write first, and then I asked them to give me a call. And when I get a call, people would say to me things like this: how old is it? Can we take it to our home? Absolutely, under no circumstances are you taking our son, because this is the most important decision I have to make in my life. Yep. All right? The most important decision: who's going to look after our son? And then I would also say to them this: I don't know how much nannies get paid. And these days, a nanny generally is a person who only wants to look after your child, but doesn't want to cook, doesn't want to clean, doesn't want to iron, doesn't, do any of those things. And so we were asking for something that theoretically nobody was willing to do. And then I narrowed it down to 2 people. I narrow it down to a short list, and then I get my wife involved. all right? And the two people were a Filipino lady and a Fijian lady. Now, you know why people from those backgrounds are amazing with kids.
Mm.
And, of course, Filipinos often speak Spanish. Now, something when the Filipino lady turned up, my wife wanted her, right? She was immaculately dressed. She turned up with her husband in a Range Rover. And I'm going, Range Rover, why do you need a job as a nanny? I don't ask that question, but I'm going, something doesn't sit well with me. All right? And then she had 5 children, so clearly she knew a bit about kids. And she had immaculate references. And I'm thinking, how do I get out of this? Because my wife wants her. And I don't take, and I never have taken much notice of written references. This is another of my bugbears with slave traders and with employers, right? Have you ever seen a bad written reference? And then we have this thing called the Privacy Act. Have you ever seen a reference that somebody's given you from somebody that isn't their best friend or something like that? It's complete horse manure. So at some stage you have to use your judgment, okay? And I'm going, how do I get out of this? Oh, well, I guess I'm going to have to do something that I don't rely on, which is I'm going to have to phone the written reference. Now, I phoned that reference, and that woman worked for a home care company in Wellington, so she told the truth about that. When I got the receptionist, receptionist said, oh, that person isn't here. And then my mind went, this is fantastic. And I said, here's the reason why I'm calling. I have to make the most important decision of my life. And this, I'm calling because she's applied for this job as the nanny for our son. And the receptionist said, oh, I can do better than that. Remember, because what I'm doing affected is I'm saying, I need your help.
Mm.
And she said, I can put you through to the person who was her boss. Even better, eh? So I get there, and then I say, this is the most important decision. I explain it to her, and she goes, let me explain it. Perhaps I can answer your question this way. Her job was to look after elderly people. She told the truth about that. This is what I can tell you. Sometimes we'd get a call from some of those people, and her job was to cook for them, bathe them, clean their house, and she hadn't been there for 3 or 4 days. And I just went, yes, right? So eliminated. And the next one, the Fijian lady, and Fijians are wonderful with children, and she's willing to cook, clean, all of those sorts of things. And I know he's going to get looked after. Only one thing with her, she didn't drive. So she was reliant on her husband to bring her, who was the taxi driver. And she turned up half an hour late. And I said to her, well, you know what this means, don't you? And she went, yes. And then my wife said, what do we do? And I said, well, it's really simple. And this process had taken 3 months, right? We just start the process again. I'll place the ad again. And the next day, we got a call. And it was from this, I could tell by the voice coming down the phone that she was an older English woman who was in her 60s. And I said, and one of the other things that I said to people when they'd phone up, I don't know how much people get paid. Bro, do you think I don't know how much people get paid? All right? And all of them, so how much do you want to get paid? So they'd all go, boom, thinking I'm stupid. All right? So I'm going, you don't want the job for the right reason. So I'm talking with her and I'm going, I can feel the warmth and the kindness in her voice. And I go, wow, this woman. I said, so why are you looking for a job? And she goes, oh, well, I've been looking after the family of the children of a family in Mount Eden, which is where we lived, for the last 12 years. and they're moving to Kumiu. And I don't want to move because I live in Mount Roskill. Wow, 13 years for the same employer, right? And then I said to her, so how much do you want to get paid? I don't know how much. She goes, oh, I don't care. Whatever you think's fair. And I went, wow. And then I said to her, so do you have any children of your own? And she went, I have 2. I adopted them both at birth. They're now in their 20s. And I went, wow, this woman loves children. And I hung up the phone and I immediately said to my wife, we found her. My wife said, how do you know? And I said, I can feel the kindness and the warmth in her voice. Oh, and one other thing. She asked me, she said, how old is he? And I went, he's 3 months old. And she went, oh, I haven't looked after one that young for so long. And I just, quick as a flash, went, don't worry, it comes back really fast. And in the morning when she turned up, okay, I'm talking with her, and of course, I've already made up my mind. However, my wife is reluctant. And my wife's reluctant because she's saying, she's putting up all of these objectives, objections, right? Which is she could hurt her back bending over to bathe them and things like that. And I'm looking at her written references. I'm going to my wife, look at these. They're amazing. They're incredible, right? The man who doesn't take any notice of them, but these are incredible. And she goes, well, nah, she could hurt herself and I feel bad because she's a doctor. And I went, well, I'll phone her references. Now, those 2 references were from people and she had told me about the people that she'd worked for, and she started working for them looking after their parents, who then died. Okay, and then the children when they were born, their children when they were born. The father owned a very significant high-end plumbing merchants company. So I phoned him, and he said, and I explained to him the objections that my wife had, right? And he said to me, well, I'll answer your question this way. She comes round to our house at 6 o'clock every morning to walk our dog. We didn't ask her to do that. She's an early riser. Mm-hmm. She just wanted to walk the dog. She mows our lawns. We didn't ask her to do it. She just does it. And I went, great. That was the husband. Then I phoned the wife, who was one of Auckland's top real estate sales people. And she said to me, Joan has been a better mother to my children than I have. You can't get a bigger recommendation than that, can you? So, and then she came around and we'd agreed how much she would get paid. And then on day 1, I gave her a pay rise. Okay? And then she would never take any money off us for babysitting. So how did I overcome that? I bought her and her husband gift vouchers to go on holiday in places like Rotorua and stay in hotels, and vouchers to go to dinner and trips to airfares to Australia and things like that. So that's how I manakied her back. Okay, why am I sharing this story? I'm sharing this story because I'm saying you got to understand relationships, and you got to learn to ask people to understand people, and the way you do that is by talking to them. And how did I learn that? By observing my mother. How did I learn that? When we would go to the bus stop, and my mother was there, and there are other people on the bus stop. My mother would say to them, "Good morning. What's your name? Where are you going? Okay, what are you going to do today?" Same when we sat on a bus. All right. So this is how I've learned to talk to people. And I'll share this with you, bro. Do you think I'm an introvert or an extrovert? Don't angst over it. Quick.
Introvert.
I'm 100% an introvert. However, I've learned to overcome my fear of talking to people. All right. How did I overcome it? when I worked in advertising, my first boss, we were the media department. We're the biggest ad agency in New Zealand. The media department, my boss and me. All these other ad agencies had even 10, 15 people working in them in the media department. I didn't know what the hell all those people were doing. I'm 18 years old, 19, 20. And I didn't drink much back in those days. Pretty unusual for a kid, 18, 20, to drink because I was heavily into my sport. And all the media reps in those days used to ring you up, try to take you out to lunch, get you drunk, buy advertising. Well, I would refer them all up to my boss. Then one day my boss came down to me after 6 months of me referring them up to him, and he said to me, I know you don't like doing this, but here's what's going to happen. You're going to have to pick one a month, and you're going to have to go. And you're going to have to learn to talk to people, and you're going to have to learn to talk to people you don't know, and potentially people you may not like. And you're going to have to get used to it. And then Television New Zealand in those days used to launch their seasons programs at a place called Trillo's downtown, which was the biggest events venue in Auckland. They had big screens then, which must have cost absolute fortunes. And you'd sit at a table with, 12 people at it, and there was all the wine, all the champagne. You could drink the fanciest food. And I would go, and I'd spend the first half an hour sitting in the toilet, hoping that everybody would go away. And so it meant I didn't have to talk to anybody next to me. And then I'd go back and they'd still be there. So I had to learn to talk to them. And then I just kept thinking about how did Mum do it? And so I learned to talk to people. I can walk into a room now. I can work the room. I'll know everybody in the room that I'm supposed to talk to. And I'll go up and I'll talk to them and I'll acknowledge them and I'll talk with them about something that's important to them. Yeah. Not me, something that's important to them. And then I'll leave. I don't do what a lot of people do, which is go up to people and tell them that, thank you, blah, blah, blah. There's hundreds of people in the room. They don't need to know I'm leaving. And I leave as fast as I can, and I go home and I go to sleep because I'm exhausted. Right now, I know how to transfer enthusiasm. Yeah. All right? And here's the other thing. I know how to get shit done. And people know I know how to do it. So they trust me. And they're right to trust me because I do this. I say what I mean what I say, I do what I said I was going to do. Life and business are really easy. That's all you have to do. I believe in the power of 3. And if you know the way that I do things through this, I'll always talk about 3 things, Why? Because our human brains can't deal with a choice set bigger than 3. So you think about it. You're in a restaurant with 20 people, especially if you're there with, and people will always say, what are you going to have? I'm going, what does what I'm going to have, how is that going to impact on what you're going to have? And then you'll go something, I think I'm going to have the fish. And then they go, well, I was going to have the fish. Well, you can still have it, right? But people won't do that. So you've got to learn to be decisive, to make decisions, and to be able to make choices. And you've got to be able to do it quickly and be decisive. One thing you'll learn about me, and people will tell you about me, is I'm either decisively right or I'm decisively wrong. I don't mess in the midlands, right? Yes. Because I've also learned that life is grey. I've also, life, nothing ever happens until somebody takes action. So while most people are busy trying to make everything perfect, then I'm starting. If something's 50% ready, I'm off. I'm going, right? And then I go through that process of refinement and constant improvement, making mistakes. When I make a mistake, I put my hand up say it was me, apologize, fix it up really fast, and keep moving forward.
Interesting. And so you made the biggest decision of your life to find the right person to be with your son?
100%.
And then that allowed you time to dive into advertising?
Well, I was before that, I was already working with some of the biggest ad agencies in the world. What that allowed me to do was I established my own sales and marketing consultancy. All right, which I had before he was born. However, when he was born, I downsized it and went home. Okay?
Got you.
And I had two sides to my business. If I told you the name of my company, which I still have now, you would never have heard of it. And I've been involved with several other companies as well. Why did I not want people to know what I was doing?
Yeah, that's something I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
And why are you okay being with me today talking about that?
Yeah, simple. The reason is I had two types of customers. The first type of customer was ad agencies. So I worked in ad agencies. A lot of my peers were now becoming what you call the managing directors because they didn't have CEOs then. And ad agencies in those days didn't want to do anything other than make television commercials. So I produced all of their print production. I did that. I was an external print broker for them. And here's what I can tell you. I don't know anything about printing, okay? But I know a bit about relationships and how to build relationships with good printers. And so that's what I did. And those guys in those ad agencies trusted me, all right? And so I, by default, became probably the largest buyer of sheet offset printing in New Zealand. And then I had my other type of customers, which were all these marketing and big brands directly, for whom I did all of their advertising. What does that mean? I produced their television commercials, their newspaper and magazine advertising, radio commercials if they needed them, and I placed all their media. And these were in the times when you got 20%. So here I am, walking into ad agencies, doing all of their print production, and I'm also competing against them. And my brands were big. Okay? Millennium and CDL hotels. I did all of their advertising for them, for those brands. When the general manager went from there to the competition and they came to me, I created all the brand identity for the Heritage and City Life brands all those years ago. And those brands still exist today, right? I was walking through Christchurch a couple of months ago with my wife, and I looked up and I saw the Heritage up in lights, and I laughed and I said to myself, you know, I'm responsible for that through, you know, and all those years later, it's still there. Sure, I was well remunerated, but I should be on residuals. Yeah, because they're making a fortune out of that stuff. You know.
Yeah.
And then the other brands that I had, Air Pacific, I did all of their television advertising in New Zealand. Fiji Visitors Bureau, Tourism Queensland, I made all of their handled all of their advertising in New Zealand. You know, and all of these big multinational ad agencies had those brands up in their receptions. Sure, they looked after it in the rest of the world, but they didn't look after it in New Zealand. Little old me did. And I never had any challenges with the creative department because I was the creative department.
Yeah.
You know?
And the same things work the whole way through, you know, manners, relationships, I guess the due diligence that you highlighted through looking for somebody for your son, you know.
That's it.
And you just kind of, did it matter how big the contracts got? I mean, I'm assuming you still saved everything.
I did millions of, this is another thing, I did millions of dollars worth of business on nothing more than handshakes.
Yeah.
And people say, how'd you do that? Well, you can't do that.
Yes.
No, the truth is, you can do that. There's another oxymoron that you'll hear people say all the time, and you will have heard this. You should never do business with your friends. You heard that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me tell you this. The only people you should do business with are your friends.
Yeah.
You just need to know the difference between a friend and an acquaintance. Because here's the thing. Friends don't shit on friends. Okay? So I was doing business that the managing directors of those ad agencies that I did all their print broking for, guess what? One of them was my first boss. Well, the directors of that company, J. Walter Thompson at the time, 3 of them. One was my old boss, a guy called Ralph Harding. Another one was a guy called Kevin Ramsey. And Kevin went on to run J. Walter Thompson Southeast Asia. And the other was Andrew Sadlier, the creative director. And then at Ogilvy and Mather, the managing director was Peter Spencer, who I had worked with in another ad agency. So you see, this is all relationship-based. And when I started my company, here's what I did. These are things that I never understood and I had to learn myself. I was just starting. And so I went to all of my suppliers and I said, look, I'm just starting out. These are people who knew me from doing business with me when I was working in the big ad agencies. I may need 60 or 90-day terms with you. And they all go, whoa. I said, whoa. I would rather tell you this now than come the 20th of the month or whatever, and I don't pay you because I haven't got the money. And then I went to all my clients and customers and I said this, I will work over broken glass and bare feet for you. I will work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for you. You don't even have to say thank you. All you have to do is come the terms and conditions that we've agreed on which I will get paid. And if it was 20th of the month, then you do that. You pay me. And when I was just starting with them, I said, I need you. See, I'm asking for help. I need you with my first jobs that I do for you to pay me cash on delivery. Now, these are big companies. They know that I'm starting out and they want to help me. So the first jobs that I do for them, and they were worth a significant amount of money, they paid me cash on delivery. So what did I then do? I've got an expectation on my suppliers out the other end that they're going to get paid in 60 or 90 days, which they've given to me. I don't do what a lot of other people do, which is string them out for the 60 or 90 days and put my money on term deposit. I pay them on the 20th of the month. So what have I done? I've exceeded their expectation, haven't I? And so these are things that once you do that and you build up that relationship. So guess what? On my supply side, when I need something done urgently, guess who gets it done? All right? If I need something done over the weekend or at night, who gets it done? Me. Everybody else goes to the back of the queue. And this is the thing about business. I've surrounded myself with people who know a lot more about the ways of money and making money than I do. What I did from secondary school, my best friend, right? His dad, I looked at his dad and I made his dad my surrogate dad. And I went, wow, this is incredible. We're in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th form. His dad came to every event, every school event, every special assembly, every sports day during school and on the weekend that my best friend was involved with. And I went, how does he do that? Doesn't he work? Because my dad worked as a labourer for the railways, so he couldn't come. And then when I went round to his place, in his basement, his dad had all of these magazines called The Economist. So we're talking in the 1970s. And guess what I did? I read all those magazines, all right? And his dad was the managing director of the largest management consultancy company in New Zealand called PA Management Consultants. And guess what? I'm saying that a lot. He worked from home in the 1970s. So, and he drove a Jag and he drove a Scimitar. And I went, wow, this is incredible. How does he do this? Okay. And so he was working from, sure, he went to the office, but he went to the office 10 or 11 o'clock and those sorts of things. So I went, I want to be able to do this one day. And what happens to you is, actually, I'm going to come back to that. His son, the way that he used to talk to his dad, I couldn't believe it. And I say to his son, you shouldn't talk to your dad like that. Your dad's amazing. Okay, because my dad didn't know all these things. And he said, oh, he's just a silly old fool. I'm going, okay, that's interesting. And then they used to come and pick me up. So we're talking about a very wealthy family who didn't care that their son's best friend came from theoretically the wrong side of the tracks. And they'd come and pick me up and take me to Lake Rotawiti, to their batch in their Jag. And I got to see a part of the world not available to people like me. And I went, I want a piece of that. How do I do it? And so I set about taking steps. I always work backwards from outcomes, right? And so I'm going, that's where I want to be. How do I get there? And then what I learned, like when I first started at Charles Haynes, I started as the messenger boy. And I mean the messenger boy. My job at 10 o'clock in the morning and then at, I think it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, yeah, because we had lunch between 1 and 2, was to run the messages. And that meant I had to walk from Grays Avenue with all the mail to the post office in Wellesley Street, post the mail. Then I had to walk to the New Zealand Herald, pick up the Heralds, walk to the Auckland Star newspaper, pick up the Auckland Stars for all of the directors. And if there was any other mail that had to be delivered to clients around town, I was delivering it. And we had Hallaby Meats at that time, which was the biggest retail meat chain in New Zealand. 20 to 30 stores they had.
Corned beef.
Yeah, all of it, man. all of it. And I had to walk to their head office, which was down on Key Street. Now, again, the Mr. Henshaw gave me money for the bus fare. So the trolley bus downtown and trolley bus back up. Now, when McDonald's started in Auckland, they were in Queen Street. Well, guess what I used to do with my bus fare? Go to McDonald's, buy myself a thick shake and a flippin' and a burger, and I'd walk it. And because I was off doing the messengers, nobody knew how long I had to take on doing the messengers. And here I was getting a milkshake and a thick shake they were, and a burger on the company.
Yeah. And somehow having a higher quality of life than people trapped in the rat
100%,
race.
100%. Because, again, the wonderful thing about my boss, he said to me, I don't care what you do, so long as you do all of the work that you've got to do. And if today you've done absolutely everything that was expected of you, and he taught, and I still do it today, at the end of every day, I had to write down what I had done today and what I had, my list of things to do tomorrow. And he'd look at it and we'd check it off. So I'm checking off, I'm achieving all my goals for the day. And at the end of the day, I'm writing down everything that I have to do tomorrow. So when I arrive at work, I'm just into it. I know exactly what I'm doing. And so he taught me that. And he said to me, if you've achieved everything, go home. Go to the gym. I don't care. And
he wasn't kind of tricking you with...
No, he meant it. He meant it.
He
meant it. He absolutely meant it. Because he used to go to the gym. That's why I started going to the gym, because he was going to the gym. And this is in, 1978, 1979. Gyms then, they were pretty dungy. The YMCA was pretty dank. And that's where we went. And I learned to weight train with guys who were big, guys who were 16, 17 stone. And I was 10 and a half stone. I didn't know what they were lifting was heavy. So I just tried to lift what they lifted. And I did. You see what I mean? It's the power of your mind.
Yeah.
It's the power of your mind. And so one thing else he said to me, if you go to lunch and you get drunk, don't ever come back to work. Okay? That was wisdom, because there was a lot of, that done in those days. I saw so many guys come back to work drunk, including, guys who the company had paid fortunes to come in as creatives, come back drunk as a skunk, make fools of themselves, and get fired. They didn't mess around. So that was wisdom. So, if you've done what you need to do, and I still do that today.
And when you were starting your own business and things were tracking along, your mum was around? She got to see?
No, my mum wasn't.
Okay.
My mum wasn't. I'm going to back up the track on that one. You see, my mum only wanted, I wake up every day with just one goal. That's to make my mother proud. That's the honest engine truth. In my office, I've got a photo of my mum, all right? And I look at it every morning. And if I say to myself, if by the time I go toes up, if I've come up to my mother's kneecaps, I will have done really, really well. Okay? And yet I have all the trappings of what conventional society calls success. And my mum and my dad never owned enough to own their own house or a car. Okay? But I'm the end result. So my mum and my dad were unbelievably successful.
Absolutely.
And this is what I learned. Okay? So when I was building my business and stuff like that, and businesses, Mum said, all Mum would really like is for you to buy a granny flat, a house with a granny flat, so Mum can live in it. And I said to her, I can't. So because I don't have enough money. And what I hadn't learned and I hadn't understood was this thing called cash flow, right? This is what most people don't understand about the bank. If you've got a mortgage, the bank isn't interested in how much money you have in your bank account. The bank is interested in your ability to repay the mortgage. Okay? So here, and looking back, knowing what I know, I had it. I had more than enough. I remember, and I'm not saying this to sound like a big who I am, the day when I had my first $1 million in my bank account, in my company bank account, not my personal bank account. And that's the day I realized that I understood why so many small and medium-sized business people get in trouble. Because they see that $1 million and they think it's theirs, and it's not. All right? There are some basic rules that you have to learn about business and about debt and about debtors and about creditors. And the first one is, and again, I like to keep things simple, as I go, so I'm going to ask you this question, Will. Why are you in business?
To make money.
You're one of the first people that's ever answered it honestly. All right? And most people don't.
Yeah, but
No, let me finish. Let me finish it. Most people will waffle on about, they want to do this, they want to do that. And I go, here's the thing. The thing about business is you're in business for one reason only, and that's to make money. Why? Because if you don't make money, what happens?
You go out of business.
Right. So it's incumbent upon you to make money. The thing is, it's how you make your money that's important, ethically and honestly, and then what you do with your money. And as you know, my view of money is that money's like horse shit. Spread it round and things grow because it acts like fertilizer. Hoard it and it starts to smell. I asked myself how much is enough about 20 years ago. And I went, we've got enough.
Yeah, okay.
I don't need any more. We're not stinking rich. We're more than comfortable.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's enough. So the last 20 years I've spent giving back. But I'm going to come back again because I segued away on the cash flow one.
Yep.
Okay. What people don't understand in business, and I'd say I'm going to use $1 as the example. For every dollar that you make, the first 30%, it ain't yours. Who does it belong to?
Bank, government.
The Inland Revenue Department.
Yeah.
All right. The second chunk, who does it belong to? Not you. Your debtors. The next chunk, who does it belong to? Not you. Your staff. Now, if there's anything left over, that's yours. So you'll hear these oxymorons. People say, pay yourself first. The last person you pay is yourself, you idiot. All right? The pay yourself first mentality is what is why we end up with people like those Devals, right? Well, we end up with nincompoops like that who live a life because they're paying themselves first and they're greedy. Okay? So, and here's another thing that I've learned about business. If people aren't paying their bills, tell everybody. That's how we'll get rid of all the shonky people. You know why people don't do it? Shit, if you don't pay me, trust me, I tell everybody. You don't pay me, and we've agreed that you should pay me on the 20th of the month. You know what happens on the 21st? I go around to your office and I yell and I scream in your reception because it's my money and you need to pay it to me. What happens? The squeaky wheel gets the oil. And that's how you get rid of all the shonky people who aren't paying people. But people don't want to do that. And you know why? Because they don't want to look stupid. I don't get embarrassed because guess what? I've now got my money and you nincompoop because you didn't go around there and yell and scream. You're now in 60 days, 90 days, 120 days. You're being used as the bank to manage their cash flow and you've allowed it to happen. In all my years of doing business, I've never had anybody in 30 days, 60 days, or 90 days. You know how many times you have to go around to somebody's office and yell and scream and shout to get your money? All right?
I love it.
And most people are fuckamah. They won't do it.
Yeah.
I'm not one of those people because it's now my money. You pay me. So the Inland Revenue Department, $1, you know, if you get anything left over, that's yours. That's why most people are better off working for somebody else. They all think the grass is greener on the other side. It is far from green. It's not a lot of fun. The only honest billionaire I've ever heard speak was Richard, there's two, Richard Branson and the guy who owned Dick Smith Electronics.
Okay.
Well, it was Dick Smith, wasn't it? And Richard Branson said, you know, being the CEO of a big company is easy. It absolutely is easy. It's the easiest job in the bloody company. Why? Because you have everybody else to delegate things to and to get them, and then all you do is make their life a misery until they achieve those things for you. Okay? A small business owner, you know, a sole trader, has to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They have to learn how to do their tax. They have to deal with all of the debtors, all of the creditors. They have to be at the front of the house, all of those things. They don't have fancy accountants and lawyers, and they can't afford it. Okay? So, you know, here's a shout out to everybody who's a small business owner. CEOs, sorry, bros, your job is not that hard. And when I see a CEO getting paid millions of dollars and tens of millions of dollars, quite honestly, it makes me want to puke. So
it's, social media is an interesting one because there's so much advice now. Everyone's got advice, inspiration. And what I love about how we're talking is your story's different to mine, but there's parts that we can all map ourselves onto things you're saying, and that's super valuable. I'm sitting here trying to think of questions, but I'm like, oh yeah, that's that thing and that's that thing. And I'm sure Guy and I are both thinking about provisional tax, right, Guy?
Yeah.
Nailed it.
That's right. Because you don't want the Inland Revenue Department
that's right.
to become an enemy.
Keep ahead of it.
And I'm serious. It's really, really important. And here's the other thing you'll notice about me, Will. Through anything that I've done, have I given you any advice?
No, it's been stories.
And I won't give you advice.
I
give nobody advice. All right? I will share story and my life experience. And the reason why I'm coming forward now to start sharing this stuff is because there's a lot of good stuff in my head. And, as you're aware of, I've gone through some fairly significant health scares at the moment. And I've gone, whoa, I've always known this, that the only thing of real value that we have is our time, and that life hangs by a cotton thread. The thing is, tick-tock, time is running out for me. Yeah. And I've gone, it's incumbent upon me to start sharing this stuff because I didn't have anybody to share it with me.
Yeah.
And it's like I said to you, I don't know how I know, but I used these, I used this, and I used this. And I asked questions. And I'm going to give you another example of it. And if something never makes sense to me, I'll figure it out. If I'm expert at anything, it's figuring out something that somebody told me I couldn't do. All right? When I was a kid, coming home from Ponsonby Primary, there was a place called the Lees Library. The Lees Library, I walked past it the other day. It's now basically a condemned building. And the kids' section of the library was downstairs. I read, I'm not joking, every book in that kids' library. And then when I finished doing that, I went upstairs and started reading the kids' books. So this is in the mid-60s, the adult books. What books was I reading? I was reading basically books on the history of the world, biographies of people like Winston Churchill, Golda Meir, the history of World War I, the history of World War II, the history of India, the history of the United States, the history of South America, the history of New Zealand. It's why I know a reasonable amount about our nation's dirty little history, and most people would prefer to forget it. And then one day, the librarian changed because I was taking out the adult books, and the librarian said, "You can't take these books out." And I said, "Why?" They said, "Because these are adult books and you don't have an adult library card." Well, I'll fix that. Went home, got my mum to get a library card. All right, so I used my mum's library card to get those out. The library changes again. And that new librarian says, "You can't take these books out." Why? Because this library card isn't yours. And I went, "But my mum works. The library's closed, 4 o'clock in the afternoon in those days. She can't get here in time to get the book out." I said, "Well, rules are rules." And I've got a story for you on rules too. And so I went, how do I get around this? So easy. I took those books, I took them downstairs to the kids' part of the library. I opened the window, I threw them out, and I stole the books. Now, what numbnuts stops a kid who's got a love of reading from reading? Okay? I took the books back, but they effectively turned me into a crook. Now, what was the story I said I had for you?
Rules.
I don't have rules. I don't have, and I don't believe in them, and I don't believe in terms and conditions. I believe in these things called guidelines, all right? And I set the guidelines for people who've worked for me, and I say this to them about guidelines. Here they are. Within the framework of these guidelines, do whatever you want. Don't come and ask me for permission if it's within the guidelines. Go outside those guidelines at your own peril. If you go outside them and it goes well for you, I'll be the first person to congratulate you. If you go outside those guidelines and it doesn't go well for you, I'll be the first person to lop your knees off. All right? And here's the other aspect of that. If you come to me and you say, I've got a problem, you've now got two problems. Because you got a problem with me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Come to me with what you're going to do and put it on the table. Now, you might go, okay, I'll look at that and go, might not necessarily be the way I would do it. But if we're working backwards from the outcome, and as I've said to you, I'm only interested in outcomes, and it's going to achieve that outcome, which way are we going to do it? Your way or my way? Well, we'll do it your way every single time. Because there's more than one way of achieving something, isn't it? And it doesn't always have to be my way.
Yeah.
In fact, I'd prefer it wasn't. I used to go on long overseas holidays, and I used to listen to all of my peers complaining about all of their staff and how their staff turnover was so high and blah, blah, blah. And I used to say to them, oh, well, I pay everybody 50% more than the market rate. And they'll go, oh, you can't do that. You'll go bust. You blah, blah, blah. And I go, well, I just spent 3 months overseas on holiday, and look at you numbnutsers, right? Why was I paying people 50% more? If you pay somebody 50% more, do you think they're going to be unhappy?
No.
How hard do you think they work? Do you think they work 50% harder? They work a hell of a lot harder. So I'm paying somebody 50% more, but I'm getting 2 or 3 persons' work out of them. So I have to employ a lot less people.
And the guideline is the deal between
That's
you
the
both.
deal.
Yeah.
That's the deal. Now, they still know that they can get hold of me, even though I'm overseas. However, they know if they make that call, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. They've got to answer to you too.
so they prefer to make the call.
Yeah.
To solve it themselves.
Within the guide.
Within the guidelines.
Yeah.
Or if they can't, then they phone me and they explain to me why they haven't been able to. And I go, cool. All right.
Yeah.
I once, and bro, I tend to ask questions without, again, sounding like, that I already know the answers to of somebody who works for me. And so when somebody, makes a mistake, and remember the work that I was doing there was I was taking a margin on something. So if I'll just use numbers, if I'm doing a job and it's worth $100,000, it's going to cost $100,000, and I make 20% on that, okay, and it goes wrong, and I have to pay $100,000 to fix it. Do you know how much work I need to get to cover that? I need $1 million. So if I make a mistake, it's a huge mistake.
Yeah.
So if you make a mistake and it's an honest mistake, and I know what the guidelines are, and I'll know how the mistake occurred, and you come to me and you say, oh, blah, blah, blah. I go, so, okay, tell me what happened. And then you go, blah, 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 and you're trying to offload it onto everybody else. It won't work. It won't work because I have set the parameters and the guidelines, and you went outside them. So just fess up. And where did I learn that one? I think it was when I was in the year 12, sixth form at secondary school. Again, one of my friends. We were driving. We'd been to his family's batch, and we were driving. How's this? 16-year-old kids in a Chev Impala driving back from Taupo. And my friend said to me, "Do you want to drive?" "Oh, I don't want to drive." "Do you want to drive?" And I felt the peer pressure. And it was after that I decided I'm never going to ever feel peer pressure ever again. And so I drove. And we were just before Tirau, and a car came around the corner coming the other way, towing the caravan, and it snaked across the road onto our side. I overcorrected, and those cars had power steering. But power steering in those days was pretty loose. And I overcorrected one way, and it swung. And then I overcorrected back the other way, and it swung again. And I had another chance to overcorrect and probably stay on the road. However, there was also a chance that I could hit the oncoming car. So I chose to overcorrect and go off into the ditch. And you know what? A Chev Impala, when it tips over on State Highway 1, you can actually stand up on it. So there we were on State Highway 1 standing up in this Chev Impala owned by his parents. And we had a couple of girls in the car. Behind us, a doctor stopped. We asked if he could take them back to Auckland. And then him and I hitchhiked back to Auckland. We got to Hamilton, phoned his father, and I said, "Let me talk to your dad." And I said, "I want you to know that it was me that did it, not Mark. It wasn't his fault, and I'll pay for the car." And his dad said, "Look, I was just interested that nobody got hurt." On the Monday, I went to my bank. I got all the money in the world that I had out, which was probably a few $100. I went to his house and I asked to see his dad, and I said, "This is all the money that I've got. I'll pay the rest off." And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, "Thank you. The car's insured. All I was concerned about that nobody got hurt." And that's when I learned that honesty and integrity is the best policy. Okay? And that's what I mean about making sure that people pay their bills. And I learned it again from my mum. You just also need to know how to be prudent, thoughtful, and considered with words. And most people aren't.
I think that's a good way to kind of wrap up that chapter or that story. I mean, there's much more to dive into, but I feel like the themes, the threads tie together. In my head, I've been thinking horse shit in terms of the two things you said were horse shit. One, hogging the money.
Yeah.
And two, written references.
Yeah.
I think that's hilarious.
Yeah, they are.
But, Boris, thank you for spending time with me and just, throwing some stuff out there and allowing us to map our story onto yours. It's a tricky world sometimes and we're all a bit different, but in some ways we're all a bit the same. I like that the ideas of building relationships is very fair because everyone has a chance to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess it compounds in its own way because if you're trustworthy, someone will recommend you. It's something we find in our business that, yes, we're not sustainable yet, but we're trying hard to deliver a good thing. And that will build and build and build. And it's a bit of a leap of faith to think you will get there. For some of us, it's not so easy to have the outcome in mind first. But when you asked me, what's the point of the business? And I said, it's money. Well, it's, earning money. I arrived there lately. It wasn't why I started.
Yeah.
But I know there's no other way to do it. You can have a great outcome, but not if you have no money.
100%.
Yeah.
And I also want to leave you with this one because I've recently come through what I call my chemo and radiation cocktail adventure. And it's really, really important. I want to the learnings that I've had from this, which I learned from my mum. I was the person who had to tell my mother that she was dying of cancer. And I remember thinking, and I was working at Ogilvy and Mather at the time, and I got a call from the doctor, and I realised I just burst out into tears that I now have to do something nobody ever wants to do, but I have to do. So here's the thing about life. Always do what you need to do before you do what you want to do. Because if you don't, you will never get that's not quite right. 1 or 2 people may get the chance to do what they want to do, but for the vast majority of us, it will never happen. So when I hear people say, follow your dreams and chase your dreams, I think, what a load of horse shit. Okay? Because until you have done what you need to do, you will never get the chance to follow your dreams. And all that you're doing is setting yourself up for failure. It's really important to understand that. And with my chemo and cocktail radiation adventure, I'm writing a book on it. And that book's called Pricked, Prodded, and Probed, because trust me, that's what happens to you. And the reason that I'm writing it is I want to remove the fear and the anxiety that people have around a diagnosis of cancer and what all the people around them fear, or just talking to them about it. All of my mates, I said to them, don't any of you pricks phone me up and feel sorry for me or, sympathetic. Phone me up and do what you always do. Give me crap, make me laugh, because that's what I need. And so these 3 things I have learned from it. First thing, okay, shit, this is my chemo brain kicking in. Yep. Okay, first thing, laughter is the best medicine. Diagnosis of cancer does not mean an automatic death sentence. And, geez, bro, I've cocked this one up big time.
That's all right.
This is vital. I've got it written down.
Good.
So let me go back and get it because you can edit this. I have to leave people with this one. It's hilarious, how chemo brain's a real thing. And that was really hard for me because during it, I couldn't read.
Yeah.
And for somebody like me, months of not being able, I couldn't read a paragraph because I couldn't concentrate. It's in here. So I had to do this. I had to write everything down. And it will be here. So these are just all my random thoughts.
Yes.
Way back here. And then I'll get out of your hair.
So your family have the passcode for your phone for one day they can go and have a look at the archive?
I've written all of them down.
Yeah, beautiful.
And not only that, I've said to my wife, you have to start taking more interest in where I've got everything invested and where everything is.
Yes.
My greatest strength is my greatest weakness. I make everything I do look too easy.
Yeah.
Okay, so I said, write down. I've changed my will 6 times in my life because your life changes, and you have to adapt it. And most people don't. Most people don't have one because they're afraid to think about debt. What a goose! I'll send it. There it is. Prick, prodded, and probe. These 3 lessons I have learned. Sex is overrated. Laughter is the best medicine. And the diagnosis of cancer does not mean an automatic death sentence. How do I know these 3 things? If you've ever been as banged up and constipated as I have, you will know the temporary, fleeting pleasure of sex does not overcome the overwhelming, everlasting joy of a good bowel motion. It's really important to know that.
Yeah.
Okay? So you got to get life in perspective. Don't sweat the small stuff. It's all small stuff other than death. Okay? So that's why I'm doing this, because people can take the opportunity to learn from some of this. If there is only one thing in what I've said that you can take away, take it. If you think the rest is kaka, throw it away. Thanks for this.
Thank you, brother.
Cheers.
Really appreciate it. That's awesome.